So I had a sermon prepared for this morning in which I incorporated some of the main ideas of my new book, which is scheduled to come out late next month. You can actually pre-order it right now on Amazon. I have the cover of it right here. If you can see, it's called Theodicy and Spirituality in the Fourth Gospel. And I bring it up today because the book happens to focus primarily on John chapter 9, which I just read in its entirety. There's so much to unpack in this chapter. In the acknowledgments page of the book, I thank you. I thank the good people of Christ Church Eureka. And I thank my father, Bob London, who, as I said earlier, and most of you know, passed away just a few days ago after a long and courageous battle with acute myeloid leukemia. It is because of my father's recent passing that I have actually chosen to lay aside the sermon that I had prepared for this morning. And instead, I want to talk to you and explore with you spiritual vision, inspired by this chapter from the Gospel of John, in which Jesus gives new vision, gives sight to a man born blind, a man that Christian tradition has given the name Celadonius, but he's not given a name in Scripture. And this chapter from the Gospel of John, in which Jesus is trying to expand the spiritual vision of his disciples, who see a victim and say, well, how do we blame the victim? He said, no, that's not the best way to be thinking and be seen suffering. He's also trying to expand the spiritual vision of the man born blind, as well as his interlocutors, his Jewish interlocutors. So I want to explore this idea of spiritual vision, and I want to do this by telling you about my father. So when my father was a 19-year-old college sophomore at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, he fell into a severe depression. He felt there was no real meaning in life and certainly no importance to his own life. He felt dejected and useless, and he said he felt completely empty inside. And the fact that he was significantly shorter than most of his peers and was struggling with an extreme case of acne on the face did not help at all. So at the nadir of my father's depression at Cornell, he was walking from the engineering quad, the main academic area of campus, and he was walking back to his room in College Town in Ithaca. And he told me that this walk was always fraught with danger. And this was not because of crime or harmful wildlife or unsafe terrain, but because of a bridge called Thurston Avenue Bridge. Now, the bridge itself was relatively safe, even though it was 100 feet above the bottom of Fall Creek Gorge. Now, Ithaca is, for those who don't know, is full of stunning, magnificent gorges, which is why their city motto is Ithaca is gorgeous, play on words. The Thurston Avenue Bridge was fraught with danger for my father because it posed a constant temptation for people, and especially for students, suffering from severe depression. Every year, at least one student would jump off that bridge and commit suicide. It was so common that they actually gave it a name. They called it gorging out. Each year, someone, if not several people, would gorge out off of Thurston Avenue Bridge, and no one had yet survived that fall. Cornell underclassmen crossed that bridge daily, and my dad said that every time he crossed that bridge, he contemplated jumping. And on this one day, when he felt particularly worthless, he began to succumb to the bridge's temptation. And he thought this would be the day for him to give up and to gorge out. And And that's when he looked down at a simple blade of grass, and still in his depression, he thought despairingly to himself. He said, this piece of grass has more life and purpose and meaning than I do. It grows and blooms and shines forth a beautiful shade of green each year. This simple piece of grass is more meaningful and useful than me. And then, as he was thinking that, he said, the grass exploded into this bright, shimmering diamond light. And so he thought, what in the world has happened to this grass? Now keep in mind, he was not on grass at the time. He was completely sober, but he was having this powerful spiritual vision. He didn't like to call it a mystical vision because it felt so much like he was waking up from a dream, as if that shimmering, blazing piece of grass that was beaming was actually the true reality. It reminds me of what the Eastern Orthodox say about the Transfiguration. It's not that Jesus started beaming, it's just that the disciples' eyes were open to see what was always there. Waking up to the true reality. Sleeper, awake. Rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you, as we just read. And then my dad looked up and he saw that the clouds were also beaming with that same bright, shimmering diamond light. And then so were all the people. Everybody and everything was emanating with the shine, bright, blazing light. And he tried to describe this ineffable experience to me by saying, it was obvious that everything had not just life, but really life always had life. It was full of life. It was nothing but life. And then he realized, oh my gosh, there is meaning. There is meaning to everything. There is meaning to everything, everywhere. This is the answer to all my questions. There is life, and it is full, and it is eternal, and it is everywhere, and I am part of it. And this experience lasted about an hour for my father. And he knew that other people must have had similar experiences. He knew he could not have been the only one. And so he began his journey, seeking to learn more about this divine light and how to live by it, and how to open his eyes to see that light every day in everybody and everywhere. He began his journey to cultivate spiritual vision. He decided to change his major from chemistry to psychology at Cornell, and he started studying the works of Freud and Jung, and especially Abraham Maslow, who wrote about peak experiences and how increasing our capacity to see the sacred and the eternal fosters self-actualization, which is really selfless love, which is really a commitment to something beyond ourselves. My dad also studied the French Jesuit theologian and paleontologist named Teilhard de Chardin. We talked about him on a Sacred Saunter last year. He's known by some as the Jesuit Indiana Jones. And Teilhard de Chardin is a great theologian, perhaps one of the greatest theologians, if not the greatest of the last century, the 20th century. He said, those who have spiritual vision, who have clear spiritual vision, are able to see that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that made sense to my father. That's what he understood. That resonated with what he understood from the divine light. My father then traveled across the country to study at San Francisco State, and then returned back east to graduate from NYU. And he continued to seek the source of that divine light in literature as an English teacher and as a manager of the Harvard bookstore. He continued to seek the source of that divine light in nature as an avid hiker, a mountain climber, and the owner of an outdoor supply shop. And in meditation as a yoga instructor and as the follower of an Indian guru named Sri Chinmoy, who wisely encouraged my father to seek what he was looking for, not in himself, not in Sri Chinmoy, but in Jesus Christ. Sri Chinmoy said, your real guru is not me, it's Jesus Christ. My father then attended Harvard and earned a master's in education from Boston University while dating a young, beautiful woman named Janet, who was working in administration at the Christian Science Mother Church in Boston. And after marrying Janet at a Unitarian Universalist church in Concord, Massachusetts, he earned a PhD in education and computer science at Stanford University, where he began conversations with Messianic Jews. Messianic Jews. These are Jewish people who believe that Jesus Christ is the Jewish Messiah. They believe he is who he says he is, the light of the world, the one who opens our eyes to see as God sees. My dad immersed himself in the Hebrew and Christian scriptures while raising his two sons. And my mom remembers him trying to lull my brother Matt to sleep by reading aloud passages from the book of the prophet Ezekiel, which is one of the most bizarre books in the Bible. Ezekiel is considered one of the greatest and most bizarre visionaries of all time. If anyone had spiritual vision, it was the prophet Ezekiel. In fact, the Jewish rabbis say, don't read Ezekiel until you're at least 30 years old. But my dad thought my 3-month-old brother was old enough to handle it. My father then discovered the work of a Trappist monk named Thomas Merton. I have an icon of him right here. And Thomas Merton wrote about his own peak experience, which he had on the intersection of 4th and Walnut Street in Louisville, Kentucky, on March 18th, 1958. March 18th, and my father passed away on March 19th. And Merton's description of his experience resembles that of my father's. Merton says in his book, Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander, he says, it was like waking from a dream of separateness. It was like waking from a dream of spurious self-isolation. Merton saw what he described as the pure glory of God within us, blazing with the invisible light of heaven. It was as if everyone was walking around, shining like the sun. He said that this pure glory is in everybody, and if we could see it, we would see these billions of points of light coming together in the face and blaze of a sun that would make all the darkness and cruelty of life vanish completely. Merton then concluded by saying, I have no program for this scene. I have no program for attaining this spiritual vision. It is only given. But the gate of heaven is everywhere. Everywhere. As my dad saw, it was everywhere. My father would agree that there's no real program for attaining this. It's pure gift. And so my father would encourage me often and others to humbly ask God to receive this spiritual vision, this way of seeing as God sees. Because my father believed Jesus Christ when Jesus Christ said, ask and it shall be given to you, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door will be opened unto you. For everyone who asks receives, he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks the door will be opened, even if that door be the gate of heaven. My father believed that these words of Jesus were the most important words of Jesus. The one who said, I am the light of the world, and the one in whom my father ultimately discovered the source of that divine light and overflowing, brimming life. Like all human beings, my father had his flaws and his imperfections, some of which he recognized and owned, and others to which he seemed to remain pretty blind. However, as an ardent fan of Jewish poets Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen, My dad knew full well that behind every beautiful thing, there's some kind of pain, as Dylan says. And that there is a crack in everything. And that's how the light gets in, as Leonard Cohen says. And sometimes that's how the light shines through, as it did through my father and his beautifully imperfect humanity. He passed away on March 19th, the feast day of St. Joseph, a major feast day in the church. My dad was not too into all these saints' feast days, but it's still meaningful to me. Especially the fact that St. Joseph is the patron saint of fathers. And I feel like that's so wholly appropriate, since my dad let that divine light shine through him most purely and most freely and most powerfully as a husband and as a father. And it was in being a husband and a father that he found his deepest joy and fulfillment, far more than any joy and fulfillment he found in all of his other roles. During this time of social isolation, I invite us to all humbly ask God to open our eyes to see the divine light shining like the sun all around us, especially right now in those whom we love and those who we're stuck with. May we hold our loved ones extra close during this time with deep gratitude. And may our souls be revived as we rest in the arms of our good shepherd, who comforts us through the valley of the shadow of death and who pursues us relentlessly with his goodness and his mercy. I want to conclude this sermon / quasi-eulogy with the words of a poem by Thomas Merton. A poem that was written in 1946, which is the year my father was born. And it's a poem that urges us to look and to see the shimmering light of Christ exploding all around us, everywhere, in everybody, all the time. The poem is called The Victory. Look up, you captives, crowding to the water. Look up, Ezekiel, and see the open heavens salute you with the vision of the winged evangelists. You, with your ankles in the water and your garments white, lift up your heads, begin to sing. And let your sights exulting rise and meet the miracle of living creatures in their burning flight. The message of their lamps and fires warns you. Make ready for the face that speaks like lightning, uttering the new name of your exaltation deep in the vitals of your soul. Make ready for the Christ whose smile, like lightning, sets free the song of everlasting glory that now sleeps in your paper flesh like dynamite. Make ready for the Christ whose smile, like lightning, sets free the song of everlasting glory that now sleeps in your paper flesh like dynamite. At the end of Jewish prayer services, the mourner's Kaddish is prayed, so I'm going to pray that Now, in Hebrew, as I mentioned on Friday, the prayer itself really makes no reference to death. It's all just praising God. It sounds remarkably similar to the Lord's Prayer, which was my father's favorite prayer. He would meditate upon it every day. The idea is we're praising God because an essence of God that was here on earth that we enjoyed has now returned to God. And we believe all are made in the image of God. And all of us are unique expressions of that imago Dei, of that image of God. And the image of God has been diminished among us because we do not have my Father with us, that unique expression of God's image. And so it's returned to the Father, but we can access that through love. And that's exactly what we're praying for God's kingdom to come, and God's will to be done, and God's name to be glorified. So Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabah ba'alma divara chirute v'yamlik malkute v'chayekon uv yomechon uv chaye dekol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvisman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shemei rabah mevarach la'alam ul almei almaya yitbarak v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar v'yit romam, v'yit naseh, v'yit hadar, v'yit aleh, v'yit halal shameh, dekudesha birukhu. V'ela min kol birkata, v'shirata, tush b'chata, v'nechemata, da'amiram, ba'alma, v'imru, amen. Yehe shlama rabba, min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, va'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Amen. God be with you.